action.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. The topic which I have chosen today, this evening, is talk about Dr. Annie Besant, because her birthday was on 1st of October. The entire Theosophical world perhaps has celebrated, and it was my brother who suggested, because it is quite close to 1st of October, we should talk something good about Dr. Besant's contribution to the TS and in general what she has done to humanity, and also talk about an important subject which she covered in that wonderful book, The Ancient Wisdom, which talks about the man's ascent. So this is how I plan to do. And before proceeding, yes, we were brought up at Adyar thanks to my maternal grandfather, M. Krishnamacharyalu, Krishnam plus Acharya, Krishnamacharya, and he was the Joint General Secretary for the Indian section, and more than that, he was a member of the Theosophist maybe for more than 40 years or something like that. And he breathed Theosophy till the last. He was about to deliver a lecture in somewhere in the interior part of Karnataka, and he passed away just about to commence his lecture. That was my grandfather, and we were brought up by him. He never asked us to join the Theosophical Society, but looking at him, observing him, how he conducted himself, how he was so devoted to the cause of Theosophy, and the way he used to love people, even if they are people who used to criticize him, backbite, do all sorts of things, but still he would love them. So seeing all that, seeing that example of, real example, live example at home, we were inspired to join the Theosophical Society. In those days, our diplomas used to come 2 years later, and I signed the application in 66, but I got my diploma somewhere in 68 from the Indian section. So that's the information, and everything, whatever we are today in the Theosophical Society, whatever we have learned in the Theosophical Society by way of study and all that, I think I owe to my grandfather, who has been a role model, a mentor, and so many things all rolled in one. So having paid the tribute which I thought I should pay to my grandfather, I will start talking about Dr. Annie Besant, whose birthday was on 1st October of year 1847. So 177 birthdays I think we should talk of. And she hails from a family which had good ethical and moral background, and she was well educated. She studied inorganic chemistry and biology, botany, physics and mathematics. It's a wide variety of subjects in science she has covered. So she was a scientist. So there is a slide which shows she's working in the lab. So she was a scientist, and her peers and her people who lived along with her perhaps said she perhaps understood Theosophy better and faster because of her scientific background, and she could expose, or she could expand on those ideas which were given to her by the authors like H.P. Blavatsky. She taught science for some time in the schools and colleges, and her scientific background is well known because she has also co-worked and co-authored along with C.W. Leadbeater that famous book, The Occult Chemistry. And whatever she has found out, or they have found out, later on the scientists said yes, all those compounds which they have talked about are real, and they are coming into actual practice now. She has done it in 1908, if I'm right. So those things are being validated now by the science. So she was very young when she got married. She was just about 19-year-old when she got married, and she didn't enjoy that life because she was married to a clergyman, a person from the church background, and she gave up her marriage. By the time she gave up her marriage, she had 2 children, and she liked freedom. She liked to enjoy and see and be with the nature. So a lover of nature, she is called. And one more thing which is very predominant in her character is she was very firm when she made up her mind. She didn't change her mind quite often, but whatever she wanted to do, whatever she wanted to achieve, she achieved and she worked for it. She had clarity of thought as to what she should be pursuing. So that was Madame Annie Besant. And she worked for some time in the British Museum too, to keep the kitchen fire burning. And she was at one time a follower of Charles Bradlaugh, who was an atheist and also a political activist. So she was for some time an atheist, maybe because she was not quite happy with the way the marriage went and perhaps the way things happened at home. So she was an atheist to begin with. And she was also inspired by another social activist and author and writer, George Bernard Shaw. So she could not agree with what the British government was doing with a lot of things. Especially one thing which she didn't agree was the oppression the British government brought on Ireland and Irish people. She was an Irish woman, Irish origin. She didn't perhaps like the way the British government had that antagonistic approach towards Ireland and Irish people. So she was against that. And Mrs. Annie Besant was written in some of the articles that she is a reincarnation of Giordano Bruno. And she says there is an imperial necessity to speak the truth. There is an imperial necessity and need to speak the truth. If we remember, even this gentleman, Giordano Bruno, the Italian, also died standing for truth. So they say, and she also has mentioned somewhere in the autobiography or something that she believed that she is perhaps very close to Giordano Bruno mentally. The recent article which has appeared in the Theosophist, written by 2 professors of the history, they trace the work she did for India and building up a resurgent India. India was reeling under the pressure of the British rule, and the article also talked about her qualities like the tremendous amount of love for humanity and the tremendous amount of keen interest she had to help people and to serve people. So the above qualities, love and wanting to be helpful, were evident when she dedicated herself to revive India or to restore the values of India and the culture and the ethos of India. This is what she tried when she started living in India from 1863. In the year 1889, Mrs. Annie Besant received the 2 volumes of the Secret Doctrine from a British publisher for reviewing those 2 volumes. The publisher was Pall Mall Gazette Publications. Maybe they were newspapers or a magazine, weekly magazine. They wanted her to review. But the first choice for reviewing the book was George Bernard Shaw. And George Bernard Shaw perhaps suggested the name of Madame Anne Besant to review, and she reviewed those 2 volumes, and she took a lot of keen interest in the contents which were there, and she was inspired by the contents which were there, and she went and met Madame Blavatsky, Madame HPB, in the year 1889, the year in which the review appeared in the press. So that's Anne Besant, the way she got introduced to Madame Blavatsky by way of the books first, the volume of Sacred Doctrines first, and then she went and met her and she became a member of the London Lodge of Theosophy, Theosophical Society, and she studied Theosophy. Immediately on joining Theosophy, a lot of people cool their heels. They really don't buck up and put the belt on or put the cap for studying on. So she studied Theosophy and lived the principles, that means lived a Theosophical life to start with. And she started lecturing on Theosophy in the European lodges to begin with. And the founders, whatever lodges they have founded, she used to go there and lecture about Theosophy. And Bernard Shaw was again a person who said Anne Besant perhaps was one of the best women orators in the world at that point of time. So she was a very good orator. A lot of people have talked about it, and Bernard Shaw also says that she was one of the best at that point of time. HPB also took her into the inner school, and she introduced her to some of the occult practices. And HPB wrote to William Quan Judge and said, though Anne Besant has joined very recently into the inner school, the progress she made was very rapid, far beyond others. That's what Madame Blavatsky talked about Anne Besant to W.Q. Judge, an Irish lawyer again. Madame Blavatsky wrote a note which surfaced after her death in 1891. That note read, Anne Besant was one and the only one. That's the note, that simple sentence. Anne Besant was one and the only one. That was the note H.P. Blavatsky left when she... That note, I believe, surfaced after her death. So that's how we see Anne Besant committing herself completely to the work of the Theosophical Society. She studied, lectured extensively to the Theosophical world, lodges, and took Theosophy in a big way into public. To the members, what did she do precisely? Mrs. Besant, Dr. Anne Besant, learned and elaborated and introduced a program of self-transformation and self-purification. This is something which she did. And this was given to those people who were seriously inclined. Not all were perhaps interested in the self-transformation or self-mutation. So, if you see her books, the writings, like the writing on the subject of karma, the study in karma, the thought power, and in the outer court, to mention few, they talk about what a man should do or what a person should do to cleanse oneself. And this subject of self-transformation and self-purification, Anne Besant also said about a couple of things like unfolding the powers of consciousness that was latent in man. She talked about that. And then she wrote and lectured as to how purification of the vehicles of consciousness is very important. Namely the physical, the astral, and the mental. Her book, The Study in Consciousness, which all people perhaps are aware and they must have studied a couple of times, gives so many details of the practical aspects of consciousness and the details of consciousness. Of course, a lot of it was depending on what Madame Blavatsky has written in the Secret Doctrine. She did all this so that man can use and express the powers of consciousness accurately to achieve the real purpose of life. This is what she was aiming at. Dr. Annie Besant said, if you purify these bodies, especially the astral and mental, because they're made of subtle matter, the results are going to follow. So that person who studies, who undertakes this self-purification process, will receive, or he will be eligible to receive, the higher influences, is what she said. She gave more stress, as I said earlier, on the purification of astral and mental. Physical, of course, yes, we think we know how to cleanse it, but there is also a process in which the physical also needs to be cleansed thoroughly. The highest subtleties of the vehicles, when purified, can answer to the spiritual and altruistic thoughts, said Madam Annie Besant. So this is what she gave, or she wanted the members to do. And she was one of the persons who was from the Theosophical Society, who went to Chicago and attended the World Parliament of Religions in 1893. And she traveled to India in the year 1893, lectured at all the various lodges opened by the founders in India. Founders have opened a number of lodges. They went around. In fact, Colonel Alcott went on whatever transportation is available. He has gone even in an open boat from Madras to Vijayawada and opened a lodge at Vijayawada, and then went to Eluru, went to Vijayanagaram, and so many places in Andhra Pradesh. He himself has opened those lodges. So she has gone to all those places wherever Alcott has gone and opened and talked to them and inspired them to lead the right kind of life. And when she started living at Varanasi, she learned Sanskrit, yoga, and so many things from the Pandits there. And she wrote commentaries on Bhagavad Gita and the minor Upanishads, the 10 Upanishads. And she lived at Varanasi. She worked for the upliftment to the girl, child, and woman in general. Women were not allowed to come out in public, and they were not allowed to function as independent persons who have something to say in those days. But then she made them come out and work for the country. So there are a lot of colleges which she started, schools and colleges she started for boys and girls, and the Benares Hindu University, she was also instrumental in starting that Benares Hindu University, because Pandit Madan Mohan Malavya, when he wanted to start a university, he didn't have a college. So she gave the college which she started graciously, and in those days gave 50,000 as donation to Mr. Malavya to start the Benares Hindu University. So that way she has started a lot of work in the field of education, in the field of empowering women, and especially educating the girl child. So she met for the first time Mr. Bishop Leadbeater, C.W. Leadbeater as they call, and both of them, as I said some time back, they worked together on many projects, and the most important project which people talk about is the occult chemistry, which all of us must have seen. It's a huge, thick book. Maybe not many people would venture to get into it, but I've given this book to one of the professors of chemistry, and she says, my God, this is something unimaginable what they have seen and what they have done through clairvoyance long time ago. She is Krishna Kumari by name, lives in Hyderabad, and she is retired professor, head of the Department of Chemistry. She says, whatever those two have done in that book is something worth going through, and something which they have done in 1908, not now. So Annie Besant has suggested how to study Theosophy. A lot of people perhaps do not know how to study Theosophy. She says it is not just you complete the number of pages, but then study a portion, then meditate on that or think about that, and then go back to that portion, and then third time you perhaps make notes in your journal. That's how you proceed. It's not the number of pages which count, but the way you study which counts. So she said how to study this Theosophical literature. And she also suggested members should study literature which elevates them and purify the mind. When the literature is something which is of great value, the contents, if they are practiced, will purify the mind. The study is not just intended for collecting information. That's what she said. Madam Annie Besant said the study should open the doors for spiritual growth. The study should open doors for spiritual growth. This is what she was very much interested in. She also talked about the lower mind and the higher mind. She gave a method to members to transmute the lower desires to higher aspirations. We call it in Sanskrit kama, means the desire. That should get changed into ichha. Ichha is will. So she talked about in that study in consciousness also the will, wisdom and action. So she talked about will. The kama should be changed into ichha. So she gave tools and methods in her lectures and writings to help members to do this. How to downplay the lower mind, which is the divisive mind, which is always thinks in terms of repeating what it has experienced and all that, and go towards the higher. So she has done this great contribution to members in general to change their method, how they look at their mind. There is only one mind actually. We function the lower mind because that's convenient to function in that mind. But when you remove all those things which are worth removable, then we are left with the higher mind and the pure mind, the unifying mind. So that's what she wanted us to do. She lectured on the religions. She wrote a book, The Seven Great Religions. And she said men especially, the members of the Theosophical Society, should make religion as a unifying force, not a divisive force. So outside perhaps, yes, there are people who work for dividing people based on religion, based on caste, but members of the Theosophical Society should think in terms of unifying and making it into one, which Madame Blavatsky called as wisdom religion. There is only one religion which talks about the basic contents of all religions are one and the same, so it should be unifying force. She says in one place, we can't ask the Lord Sun to send only one ray or one color to the earth. So it's all right that so many rays have appeared, so many colors have come down. Similarly, so many religions have come, so many faiths have come. So all those things would actually should help man to grow spiritually, but then most of it have been utilized or used by people who are selfish to divide people. So if, like Blavatsky said, if religions are without these superstitious practices, and religions would actually pave the way to progress so that the man can reach his goal. So during her time, she guided and encouraged a lot of youngsters. She built up an organization in Madras called Young Men's Indian Association, YMIA as it is called, and she built up a huge place at Rayapeta, and not only it has hostel, library, study place and all that, but she also built a gym. She said people who want to be strong spiritually should also be stronger physically. So she wanted youngsters to be very, very good at that. So a lot of youngsters used to rally around her for guidance and for inspiration. So especially the Theosophical Society, she gave persons who later on became international presidents. For example, George Sidney Arundel, General Jadasa, Brother N. Sriram, they were all linked into shape by Madam Annie Besant. And to the world, she introduced the philosopher and thinker, Mr. G.D. Krishnamurti. So it was her contribution in a way. Actually, Leadbeater found that boy on the beach, and both of them took care of that boy, and he later on became one of the greatest thinkers of the world. Of course, her plan was different, but then he became someone worth his salt. She advocated freedom for India. She got criticized for that by the British government. She was interned also for about 6 months in Uttakamand. She published a newspaper. She used to write articles which were very, very strong in the language and criticism about how British should hand over the ruling to Indians. So she promoted the self-rule or the home rule movement, and for that work of hers, where she was asking Indians to be given the chance to rule themselves, she was put in the jail, sort of, at Uttakamand, solitary confinement. It was not a jail, solitary confinement for about 6 months. And the work which she has done with journalists, for example, some people like B. Shivrao, B. Sanjeev Rao, and a lot of people who took inspiration from her, and she used to tell them, teach them how to write, how exactly they should be writing, so that they can influence, make public opinion. So that was the work she did for journalists. And the Theosophical Society grew enormously during her term. She got and acquired, physically I'm talking first, of lands at Adyar, Varanasi and other places. A place near Hyderabad called Warangal. She has got about 4.5 acres of land gifted by the Nizam to her in 1923 or 24. So she has taken pains to go all over the place and establish lodges. That building which was built in 25 is still there. Of course, in a very bad shape, of course. The Theosophical Society membership during her time was all-time high, I believe, 45,000 to 50,000 members. 45,000 is what I've read very surely, but somebody also said it could be around 50,000. But we have not touched that figure after that. And she got elected as the president of the international president, subsequent to the death of, we all know, of Colonel H.S. Alcott, who was the first international president. And he had a lot of trepidation and what will happen, who will be the next president and all that. And so he was perhaps talking loud, and Master M once appeared to him and told him, yes, I think the choice which you're thinking in your mind about Dr. Besant is right. In fact, Blavatsky also thought a world of her, and she said she would be a right person to carry the Theosophical Society into the future. So she was the president, we all know, for 26 years from 1907. And her contribution towards the literature, the number of talks she has given, the way she built up the American section once again after the existing members went and formed another sister concern, or you can say another wing of the Theosophical Society called United Lodge of Theosophists, and the way the American section got built up again, thanks to her again. So she has done all that for the Theosophical Society, and we have a lot of list of books which she has written, especially one which I talked about, the inner and the outer court. She talks about, there is a slide which will come later. There is a way in which you go around the hill. There is also another way in which you go up the hill, the steeper bit. She talks about all that, and she talks about the 9 avaranas and all that. So all this she has done for the sake of members and for the sake of the Theosophical Society. Having lived a life par excellence, she passed away on September 20th, of the year 1933. In the Indian lodges, some of the Indian lodges, we celebrate from September 20th to October 1st. Those 10 days we call it a Besant week. It's not exactly a week, it's more than a week, but then we celebrate it like that. From September 20th to October 1st, talk about her work, her books. Maybe somebody would study from the book or give a lecture based on the book. And the universal prayer, which I find here, she wrote in the year 1923 when people approached her during the Brotherhood Week. She wrote this, O Hidden Life. And she has done so much of service for the Theosophical Society and Theosophical members. She said once in one of the talks, actions speak louder than words, which is so true. And so any amount of our talking about Dr. Annie Besant will not do justice, because she is a colossus. She's a diamond soul, as some people say. As a diamond has got light coming through on various directions. So she is multifaceted personality. So we will not be able to talk much about whatever we talk. We'll only talk about a portion of her life. Her whole life was a great contribution to the humanity. And one of the books which she has written, the basic information about the Theosophy she has given, is in the book The Ancient Wisdom, which is a prescribed textbook for most of the people who would like to know. Perhaps next to the Key to Theosophy, people go to the Ancient Wisdom, and then the third, perhaps they go to the textbook of Theosophy. The fourth one is also there, of Dasa, which is out of print now, the first principles of Theosophy. So this is what she has done for the world as such, and for the Theosophical members as such, and Theosophical Society as such. So the next segment of the talk is based on one of the important chapters of that particular book, The Ancient Wisdom. So that's the... Can you help me? A bit tough.
Okay. I realize we have the first principle of philosophy.
Oh yes, it's there with you, but TPH is not printing these days. There are some mistakes from the point of view of science, they say. But they have given it to a scientist, but scientists also have not come back. They didn't say what was the thing which was not right. Oh. Yeah. There's a bell. I put it here. Yeah. That's a bell. I shouldn't use it for holding the bottle. Yeah. See the second segment of the talk, where she has contributed very wonderful information which is useful for all of us. She says the purpose of human life is to reach perfection. The purpose of human life is to reach perfection. Man's ascent to the stage of perfection is the ultimate goal he can set for himself. It's a long journey. It's not an external journey, as we all know. It's a journey which one takes within, goes within and finds out what exactly one has to do. And this reaching of perfection, she says, some men have already done it. They have achieved the stage of perfection, and some are striving to reach the perfection, the stage, through continuous and sincere efforts. So this is what Madam Annie Besant started talking about, the topic, the man's ascent. We have seen man growing from the embryonic stage to the person who is a primitive man, and then first, and then he moves ultimately to the stage of fully liberated, perfect man. So this is what she has said, the primitive man growing, and then primitive man also growing to a stage of fully liberated divine being. The journey is stupendous. The journey is stupendous. And this is part of the evolution. Man finds himself at the beginning of the foothill of the path he has to take, and puts his efforts to reach the peak of the hill, which is attained by perfection. So, as I just some time back mentioned, in the outer court there is a mention about the steeper path and the going around the hill path. A lot of people get stuck perhaps while going around the path. They stop, stagnate, whereas the person who is carrying less luggage or perhaps less karma on his back, he goes up the hill faster and he reaches the stage of perfection. And that's what she suggested, the steeper path. We all know, as students of Theosophy, as to how the first life wave entered the elemental essence, and then it traveled through the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, and after finishing off those kingdoms, and it moved further, and then it entered into the human kingdom. So the soul, which was a group soul in the earlier stages till animal, and it got individualized, and then man appeared on the scene. The process of individualization has been described by her in a very detailed way, and the churning which takes place, and how the portion of the group soul escapes and forms, all those things have been described. Man evolves and reaches the stage of Superman. This is the expression used by Madame Anna Besant, which is the stage of reaching perfection. Superman means a man of superior and noble nature. Noble nature. That's what she meant by the Superman, not the Superman which we see in the comics. No, not the Superman of that. There are various grades, she said, of these superhuman beings. The masters, the Dhyani Chohans, of course we have the Mahachohan also, and the Manus, and the Buddhas, and in between the builders and Lipikas. We know the Lipikas are the people who keep track, or they keep note of what is happening. So the Lipikas, the lords of karma, as we say. Man is born with a potential to reach divinity, and he is sure to become a divine man provided he works for it. The route chosen by man is through birth and death, incarnations. And this birth and death is the three worlds to which he has access. She says physical, astral, and mental worlds. In each of these worlds, man enjoys the fruits of his labor. The karmic result of what he does, he gains. As you sow, so we reap, perhaps becomes true there. Man comes back again and again and reincarnates number of times to complete the obligatory journey which we have read in the Secret Doctrine, the third proposition. So the obligatory journey to be completed, man has to come a number of times depending on how good the previous incarnation was. Perhaps he takes next birth again and tries to improve himself upon. And so he tries to complete the obligatory journey. And the individual soul, this obligatory journey is continued till the individual soul gets identified with the universal soul. This is what the third fundamental proposition talks about. And this human soul, having got identified with the universal soul, then attains liberation and stays. Whenever perhaps there is a direction to come down, they come down, otherwise they stay there. To progress on this path of evolution, Madam Anna Besant says there are two paths. She talked about the path of probation and the path of discipleship. She has written very huge literature on the path of discipleship, and path of probation also, yes, we have other literature which talks about it. And man gains intellectual, spiritual clarity. Man gains intellectual and spiritual clarity after seeing, after experiencing the emptiness of the worldly life. After experiencing the worldly life, he sees the emptiness of that, and the pleasures he knows are transient. It's not bliss, it's just a pleasure. He becomes aware of the real purpose of life through practice and contemplation. Contemplation is something which is required so that what exactly where he is going wrong, he should be able to find himself out. Or is he repeating or getting back into the same old pattern, or getting into something afresh is something to be worth pondering over. So that's why man goes through number of lives, many number of lives, to reach this spiritual awakening first. That the pleasures are not the main thing which I should work for. Even to realize that particular awakening, move towards the spirit, leave the matter and go towards the spirit. That itself will take a lot of time, a lot of lives. And when he is spiritually awakened, he realizes there is a major purpose beyond just ordinary living. There is a major purpose which is beyond the ordinary living. And the sensual or the earthly pleasures and all that, he realizes that these pleasures are temporary, are things which are momentary. So he starts thinking and realizes this is not the way, and chooses the path of negation. The path of negation is the path of vairagya, as we call it in Sanskrit, or dispassion, as we call it. He now has a thirst for experiencing the eternal, or touch the eternity. He wants to know what is the eternal truth. He breaks the walls of the prison which he has built around himself and looks out for freedom, liberty, and bliss. Move away from pleasure to bliss. He reaches a stage where pleasures of earth and joys of heaven have lost their relevance. Even joys of heaven have lost their relevance. So this is important. See, earth, yes, I have left it, but even joys of heaven have no relevance for the person who wants to grow. There is a reason for it, she explains later. The urge to reach and attain the eternal is the beginning of the probationary path. The urge to reach and attain the eternal is the beginning of the probationary path. And what is probationary path? Probationary path is the path which prepares the man, the candidate, to the path proper, or the path of discipleship. The candidates on the probationary path are observed for a period of 7 years. There are some schools which observe for 12 years. For example, Pythagoras school observed for 12 years. And all the 12 years he was only asked to listen, not even to question. So that was the way in which a candidate was prepared in the path, on the path. So the master, the teacher, observes during the probationary path. The work on the probationary path of the candidate is to excel in moral, ethical, and mental aspects of his nature. So he should become good in all these three aspects, excel in moral, ethical, and mental aspects of the nature. The candidate has to grow to a stage and has to work on himself meticulously and earn eligibility to see the master face to face. That should be the eligibility to see the master face to face. So to that extent, he has to work on himself. Now she talks about who is the master. Who is the master? Dr. Annie Besant explains there are men who have completed their human evolution and who have become part of the great white brotherhood. There are men who have completed their human evolution and who have become part of the great white brotherhood. These masters, they have a hierarchy and they guide and work silently for the development of human race. They work for the development of human race. They take birth sometimes as human beings because they have given up living on Devchan. They are only in the astral, but their astral is different from our astral. Our astral is full of desires and things like that. But their astral is clean, the desireless astral. They live there. And why they live there? They can come down immediately to earth and start working. So they have that ability to stay in the higher astral, if there is one, or desireless astral, if we can describe it that way. And they live there, and whenever they come down, they establish a working relationship with men and people who are trying to grow. And the entire work of the masters is to better and help the humanity to grow further. Masters accept certain persons who have achieved eligibility. They call them disciples. In the master's letter there is a word chela. Chela means disciple. It's a Sanskrit word, chela. So they do take people as disciples. This eligibility is based on the work the candidate has worked assiduously during the path of probation and after. So the disciples are given help and guidance by the masters to progress on the path, progress in the path of evolution. Thus, a disciple after the journey on the path of discipleship, the disciple after the journey on the path of discipleship qualifies and tries to move towards perfection with the guidance of the master. And this happens after initiations, is what Madam Annie Besant is saying. Yeah. After he becomes a master and joins the band of workers, after a person, disciple, grows and after the initiation, maybe fourth is completed and then he becomes a master, he is part of the great white brotherhood. So the young master starts working for the benefit and for the welfare of humanity as such. Master always watches and observes the men and select their people who are selfless. I believe these people who are selfless, to them who are above, the selfless people appear like beacon lights. The person who is not having selfishness in him, they are picked up by the master's how, because these people appear as bright candidates. So they are helped by the masters. So if someone is unselfish and pure and devoted to the cause of helping mankind as a whole without any choice, then he is picked up as a person worth pursuing. The masters pick them up as disciples. If a person on the earth qualifies to receive the spiritual guidance, if the person on the earth qualifies to receive the spiritual guidance of the master, it not only helps that particular individual, but it helps the humanity in general. Like we said, when Armstrong went to the moon, the humanity had done a great thing, achieved a great thing. Similarly, this spiritual upliftment of a person getting picked up to be a disciple and becomes a master of living, he also helps the evolution, the human evolution. So when some disciple becomes or grows to a stage of a master, it's a big leap to the scheme of evolution of humanity. So it is said the disciple has to have a keen and a constant eye. A keen and a constant eye, not a casual eye as some people say. It is said that disciple has to have a keen and constant eye for achieving the progress which is required to be of use for himself, become a master, become a person who spends all his time for the welfare of the human race. She says masters not only watch the disciple, they also test the disciple for his commitment on the path to help others unselfishly, whether they have that sort of commitment which is a continuous basis or they're doing once in a way. So a lot of tests are given, a lot of circumstances in life, they pan out as tests. So a lot depends on the man who becomes a disciple to achieve progress, because he has to face those tests, come out of the tests and prove his steadfastness and commitment to the cause of the unity of life, and also to see that the race moves forward, the human race moves forward. The path may sometimes be dark and narrow. Madam says the path may sometimes be dark and narrow, but the real ardent disciple moves forward to see the light. That light is the light of the wisdom. So he is not scared of the darkness or being narrow or being thorny, whatever it is. He keeps moving, and the real ardent disciple moves forward to see the light, and that light is the light of the wisdom. It is said when the disciple is ready, the master appears himself and is ready to help. Then she talks about what are the qualifications of a disciple. We are only seeing the bird's eye view of what she talked about in that chapter. So she talks about qualifications of a disciple. We also have this qualification mentioned in the small book which Alcyone has written as dictated by Master K.H. to him at the feet of the Master. The first qualification is discrimination, the ability to separate and see the real and the unreal, ability to distinguish the fleeting from the permanent. This is the first qualification of a disciple. Discrimination, we are familiar with this word. Viveka Chudamani also talks about this, and so many other books which are products of Buddhist literature also talks about it. So the second qualification is desirelessness. Disciple striving for perfection should reach the state of desirelessness through practice, continuous practice, and contemplation of what should be avoided to become desireless. This is called Vairagya in Sanskrit. As said earlier, we have touched on this topic. The disciple faces tests to strengthen the commitment he has and to test the steadfastness he has. And all this, so many temptations might be there on the path, but the disciple has to clear all that. So the qualifications of desirelessness and discrimination assume great importance in the life of a disciple who wants to move forward and progress and become worthy master. Then we are given the list of 6 attributes which she has given, which also find place at the feet of the master. Practicing these six attributes, it separates a man from an ordinary man to a man who is on the path. So the 6 attributes are like this, who is walking on the path. And Besant says, the disciple may not be perfect in all the 6, but he should sincerely try. And he may not be perfect in all the 6, but he should sincerely try. That's the suggestion given in the book. But he should be present in some way or the other in a disciple, at least partially. So the disciple should strive to reach perfection through continuous exertion, which is called sadhana in Sanskrit. The 6 attributes are listed below, which we are all familiar with. Shama, the control of thought. Dhamma, which is control of action and conduct. And Uparati is tolerance. Titiksha, these are all Sanskrit terms, they are also in Buddhist Pali literature. Titiksha is endurance. Shraddha is a beautiful faith or one-pointedness. We heard International President Tim Boyd talk about one-pointedness and faith as trust the other day when he was talking from Utkal Federation. And the 6th one is Samadhi, the balance and equanimity. These are the 6 attributes: the Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhi. That is control of thought, control of action and conduct, tolerance, endurance, faith or one-pointedness, balance and equanimity. We should endure to the end. There is no point in endurance being practiced partially. We should go to the end, find out what exactly is there, other side of the pipe, or if you are going through the pipe, say for example. When disciple is keen on developing 6 attributes, the master also helps him, teaches him, even when the disciple is resting in sleep. Resting in sleep, the disciple is helped. In fact, most of the teaching is done at the astral level. We know how Krishnamurti, when he was young, or Alkyone, when he was young, was taken in the astral to the master. And that was the lessons he got, and what he wrote in his exercise notebook became a text for us at the feet of the master. So most of the teaching is done in the astral level. And she says the disciple is advised and directed strictly to use the powers, if he gets some powers through his sadhana or exertion, only the powers to be used for others' welfare, not for his own self-glorification. So they should be used for the development of humanity, is what the powers are meant. So the practices undertaken by the disciple gives him, the realization which helps him to continue on the path. There is evolution even for the masters. We say masters, they have reached a stage, even for them there are further evolutions. So the disciple also evolves. So the guidance and the whatever he receives from the master gives him the realization, and that helps the candidate or the disciple to continue on the path. Disciple is taught how to use his sleeping hours. Disciple is taught how to use his sleeping hours. And when he is taught that, he then moves with the band of workers to the place of strife wherever it is and tries to help them out and do all that is possible to see alleviate the suffering. There are people perhaps who are bombed and they don't know how to die, or perhaps they are suffering to die. These people go and help them to die peacefully so that the pain is not there. So all those sort of things they do help, and the band of workers go around, and the disciple is taught the way in which he should travel around in astral along with the band of workers. The disciple's life is ever one of giving nature and of helping others without any expectations. And disciple inspires others to walk on the path of perfection. This is the work of the disciple. Not only he becomes perfect, he also inspires others to walk on the path of perfection. So at one stage, we find the disciple is directed by the master. She writes in that chapter. At one stage, the disciple is directed by the master to give up or renounce the life of Dev Chan, or the heaven. Some people call it Khan, C-H-A-N. We pronounce it depending more on Sanskrit, Dev Chan. The masters have done it, they have renounced. The disciple is encouraged to renounce the Dev Chan. That's what we talked about some time back. Renouncing, staying back in the astral, but that astral is different than what we normally associate ourselves with. So having renounced the stay at Dev Chan, the disciple is ready, like the master, to move down from the astral to take birth on earth, to be of help to humanity in a big way. So masters do it. If the disciple, one who has renounced the Dev Chan, can come down without spending a lot of time. You know, the average stay in Dev Chan for an ordinary man is 700 years. So, yes. So instead of spending that time, they come down quickly down onto the earth to help humanity. Masters guide, and they also look over the incarnations of the disciple. And the disciple has no personal agenda other than working for humanity. He has no selfish interests. That's all gone. In the path of progress, in the path of discipleship, all these things are left off, and he becomes a person fully dedicated to the work of human welfare. Then Dr. Anna Besant talks about initiations. She talked about initiation. Initiation means and involves a process of expansion of consciousness. And this expansion of consciousness, which happens at the astral level, where number of assembly of masters are there, it happens in their presence. So it paves the way for deeper knowledge and wisdom for the individual who gets initiated. After casting away the fetters, the disciple reaches the end of the path and is on the threshold of liberation. After casting away the fetters, the bandhanas as we call it in Sanskrit, the disciple reaches the end of the path and is on the threshold of liberation. There are 7, some people say 10, the Buddhist people say 10 are there. There are 2 schools, they also have different ways in which they go about talk about the fetters. But generally in our Theosophical society, we talk about the sense of separateness is one of the fetter. The uncertainty or doubt I have regarding the laws of karma is the second one. And superstition and belief in religious ceremonies is the third one, and pride, conceit, and anger. Each one by itself is a big process. Pride, conceit, and anger is the fourth one. Attraction and repulsion to all outer things and objects. Attraction and repulsion. He cannot have attraction the same way he cannot also have repulsion to the outer things and objects. Earthly love and attachment. Love for the matter or love for the earth and attachment. And then there is one word which is often described differently, avici. Some people call it as hell. It is also there in the letters of the Masters of the Wisdom. And this is where a person looks at himself and stands separate, and he is alone, contemplating, meditating, progressing. That's the thing. So avici is the opposite of that. He tries to break that and breaks out of the sense of separateness. So this is what I thought I would cover in this second segment of the man's ascent, as given to us by Dr. Annie Besant in that book, The Ancient Wisdom. Thank you all.
Some snacks outside. No, it's not outside, it's inside. Outside. It's not outside.
Snacks? I haven't gone now.